I would love to start by having you talk directly to the person that's listening and explain what could they experience if they really take to heart everything you're about to pour into us, the research, your experience as a physician, everything that you've learned in researching and writing 6 books. What could change about your life?
I think people are going to find that they have more energy, more focus, more motivation, better physical health, better mental health, happiness, inner calm, better relationships. Because actually the key principles, the key ingredients to all of these things, they're really not as complicated as people think.
Really?
They in my view.
Because already the list, Dr. Chatterjee, I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot. I don't even know if I can remember all this. So like, it's really not that complicated.
Yeah, well, through this conversation, hopefully people will learn yes, I'm not saying change is easy.
Yep.
But it can be simple, right? If you understand the key ingredients to change and you start applying them into your daily life. And I'm a busy guy. Look, I'm a dad. I've got 2 children. I help care for my elderly mother who lives 5 minutes away from me. I have a busy job. I know what it's like to feel busy and feel as if you don't have time to do the things that you want to do. But there is always a way to make time. I've done it for years with my patients, and I hope to show your audience, Mel, on this program today that they can also do it.
Well, I'm excited because here's what I know. The person that is listening right now, whether they've taken you and me on a walk with them, or we're sitting in the car with them, or at their house, or at work, or the person that received this conversation from a friend, they actually found the time because they care about their health. And I'm sure as you're listening, you probably feel the same way I do, which is even though I sit down with, world-renowned experts like you, I'm like, wait a minute, should I do keto? Am I supposed to fast? Like, am I exercising? Am I weight training? Am I sleeping? Am I meditating? Do I get my morning light in? And it becomes so overwhelming that I think it's easy to start and then feel discouraged. And so maybe where we should start is, as a doctor, what are just the most common health struggles that you hear over and over from your patients and from your global audience?
I think these days people are struggling with fatigue. They don't have energy. They're struggling with motivation. They can't sleep. They're feeling chronically stressed. This is affecting their physical health, their weight, the way that they feel about themselves. It's also impacting their mental well-being, how they see themselves, how they see the world around them. But what a lot of people don't realize, Mel, is that the health landscape in the United States, in the UK, and frankly, most countries around the world has dramatically changed over the past 20 or 30 years. Okay, we used to see what I call acute problems. Okay, so 30, 40 years ago, the medical system was really well set up for the problems that people came in with. So you'd come in and say, hey, doctor, I've got a cough. I've got a fever. I'm bringing up a lot of sputum. And the doctor would see you for 10 or 15 minutes, examine you, give you a diagnosis, give you a pill, and say, take this 3 times a day for 7 days. And hey, presto, 7 days later, your problem's gone away.
Right. I call that a Z-Pack, right?
Exactly.
I'm like, I need antibiotics, doc.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it worked beautifully well for those kinds of problems.
Yeah.
But today, Mel, 80 to 90% of what we as medical doctors see is in some way related to our collective modern lifestyles. Okay, now let me be really clear. I am not putting blame on anyone. The person who's listening right now, I am not putting blame on you. Okay, I understand that life is tough, that people feel stressed, they don't have the energy. I do understand all those things. At the same time, we have to understand that these modern lives and the way in which we're leading them is resulting in us being sick. Okay, and so I was very much trained the model where you try and diagnose a patient when they come in and give them a treatment, which is usually a pharmaceutical treatment.
Right.
Now that can have value. But what a lot of people still don't realize is that if you make changes in 4 key areas of your life, you can have a profound impact on so many different aspects of your health. And those 4 things are what I call the 4 pillars.
Yep.
Food, movement, sleep, and relaxation.
So let me just make sure the person got exactly what you said. So you're saying that the landscape of health and medicine has changed dramatically in the last 20 years, and that you used to, 20 years ago, have a situation where people would come in with an acute illness or problem or health challenge. You address it, we're good, we're back on track. What you're seeing now is the impact of how we are living and the stress that we are feeling and the foods that we're consuming. And that as a medical doctor and in the current health system, we're not actually addressing the root cause or potentially addressing 4 more simple things that are within our control that would have a positive impact on you and your life, no matter what you're facing. So like if the person listening has a cancer diagnosis, if the person listening is dealing with a metabolic disorder or early onset of diabetes, these 4 pillars that you're talking about are still things that as a medical doctor, you're like, let's just start here in addition to everything else.
Mel, I've been a medical doctor for over 23 years. I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and I just cannot emphasize this enough. Ask yourself, which of these 4 pillars do I need the most work in? Food, movement, sleep, or relaxation?
And no matter what it is that you're dealing with right now, you're going to ask us, let's just talk about food, movement, sleep, and relaxation.
Yeah. Now, Mel, there's a key point here. Okay. So when we talk about our lifestyle, we often talk about it through the lens of prevention. Okay. Yeah. It's important to pay attention to our lifestyle. We want to prevent getting sick in the future. Now, I agree with that. But what people forget, or they miss, or they don't understand, is that lifestyle can be part of the treatment as well.
Hold on. I got to make sure that we highlight that. So your lifestyle and some of the changes you can make starting today can be part of the treatment for any health issue, and it's part of the roadmap for you feeling better, lowering your stress, and being healthier.
Yeah, you mentioned a few different conditions there. You even mentioned cancer, right?
Yes.
So let's be really clear on this. I'm not saying that it's only lifestyle.
Right.
You may be under an oncologist and be undergoing treatment. But even if you are, paying attention to your lifestyle is going to help you manage the process of undergoing that treatment.
Okay, I love this because you're basically saying that food, movement, sleep, and rest are medicine.
100%. They're 100% medicine. The problem is we're not taught to look at medicine in that way. Okay. But I've been using those 4 pillars as medicine for many, many years. And Mel, I had the great fortune to do this on a big scale back in 2015. Okay. So back in 2015, I got my own BBC One primetime series called Doctor in the House. And I basically lived alongside families for 4 to 6 weeks who were sick. They were already sick. They already had a diagnosis. They were already under doctors and on medication. And in every single case, I either helped them reverse their condition or significantly improve it using lifestyle. So, and I'll tell you what happened. There was a lady with type 2 diabetes. I helped her put that into remission in just 30 days.
What? Using food, movement, sleep, and rest?
Using these 4 pillars, okay? I helped a lady with panic attacks, reduce them by 80% in just 6 weeks. I had a lady with menopausal symptoms who didn't want to take hormones, and we vastly reduced them in just 6 weeks using these 4 pillars. Fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. I did all of that on primetime television to show people that actually it's not about blame. This is the key thing here. When you mention lifestyle, some people will, get defensive. Go, what are you saying?
Right.
I did this to myself. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that your health is a combination of a number of factors. Yes, your genetics, for sure, that plays a role, but also the way you're living your life. And often you haven't been intentional about the way you're living your life. So you end up at some point with a set of symptoms. But it doesn't mean that the only solution for those symptoms is a pharmaceutical drug. It may be part of the solution, but a lot of the time you can actually reverse these problems if you change your lifestyle. And for me, the simplest way I managed to help my patients with that is through the lens of these 4 pillars.
I love that because I can remember this: food, movement, sleep, and rest. And it's almost like a simple checklist. So let's go through each one of the 4 pillars. What do you mean by food? How do we turn it into health? How do we turn it into medicine? How do we use it to help us be healthier, even as you're saying, like actually reverse some of the symptoms or health things that we're challenged with?
Yeah. So one of the things I've got to make really clear is that there's no one right diet for every single person.
I don't want to hear that. I want you to make this very simple, Dr. Chatterjee.
I will make it simple.
Okay.
At the same time, Mel, I think when we believe there is one true diet that all of us should be eating, I don't think it simplifies it for us. I think it complicates it. And the reason it complicates it, and one of the biggest problems in health and wellness today, is the confusion that exists.
I feel it. I especially feel it around what exactly to eat. You know what I mean? Like as a woman versus a man. Now that I'm in my 50s versus my 30s, I need a certain amount of protein. What kind of protein? Like, should I be fasting? Should I not be fasting? Should I have electrolytes?
Okay.
Like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
so when I talk about simplification, if you overly simplify, you end up confusing people.
Okay.
So I want to simplify it as far as I possibly can, but then I also want to give the listener a bit of responsibility.
Got it.
The most important principle when it comes to food is, as much as you possibly can, have minimally processed foods as close to its natural form as possible.
And so what does that mean? Like, if you were explaining that to an 8-year-old, what does that mean?
I say, listen, let's think about one ingredient foods, okay? So foods that don't have a barcode because they naturally are one ingredient. So an avocado doesn't have an ingredient list. It's one ingredient, right?
True.
A piece of fruit doesn't have an ingredient list, right? And so for a lot of my patients for years, Mel, I've been asking them to look at food labels, okay? And people are shocked at what happens when they look at food labels. That's the starting point, I think, for everyone, is as much as you can, because when you start eating more and more minimally processed food, your hunger signals will naturally start to take care of themselves. So if you're having lots of highly processed food and potato chips and the modern food environment, basically, people are hungry all the time. Right?
Why are we hungry all the time if we're like eating mac and cheese and, fish and chips, or like chicken nuggets, or we're just kind of doing dinner out of a box, or we're ordering it to go? Why does that make us hungry?
Because it plays havoc with our hormones. It plays havoc with our blood sugar. So a lot of the things we're eating these days will spike our blood sugar very quickly, which also means it's going to come down very quickly. So let's say, for example, you start the day with a bowl of sugary cereal, which is really, really common, okay?
Yep.
Now, depending on which one you eat, but most of them pretty much fall into this category, you're eating it and you feel full afterwards, and your blood sugar has started to go up pretty rapidly. Maybe after about 2 hours, it hits its peak.
Yep.
Then it starts to crash, okay? And then when it starts to crash, it's not just a hunger issue, it's a stress issue, okay?
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, let's say you have your bowl of sugary cereal at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And you think, yeah, that's going to last me till lunchtime. And then at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, whilst you're at the office, you're like, why am I so hungry? Like, I've already eaten.
Yes, I'm like cruising through the kitchen at
work. But there's
work,
a desperation. It's not like just a bit of hunger that you can deal with. It's not, I need to eat something. People go for an extra coffee, the vending machine, whatever it might be. It's often because their blood sugar has started to drop rapidly. Now, when your blood sugar drops rapidly, think about it through an evolutionary lens. That was a threat to survival a few 100,000 years ago, right? If your blood sugar is dropping rapidly,
right,
you don't just feel hungry, it elevates stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So it really is a stressor on the body.
That makes sense.
So if instead of that, for example, you had some eggs and some avocado, these kind of one ingredient foods, you'll find that it's less likely to happen. Yes, sometimes your blood sugar will still go up, but it's a bit more gentle.
Well, you know what's interesting about everything that you're saying is you say sugary cereal, and I think the mistake that I used to make for years is I would think about the actual like Captain Crunch or the stuff that is marketed typically to kids, that even in the marketing, it is sugary.
Yeah.
But when I started to do as you're saying, like flip it over and there's 32 grams of sugar in a bowl
Yeah.
of cereal. And you're like, what? And so it's kind of hidden in there. And I think that's also part of the thing that I didn't realize and a lot of us don't realize. And I love that you're not blaming us because we fall for the marketing and then we don't look at the actual ingredient list.
I had a patient once. He was in his early 40s and he came in to see me and he had a bit of weight around his belly. He was struggling in the day with his mood. And he said, Doc, I always feel like eating. And there was all kinds of things going on. But in essence, he was starting his day with sugary cereal. Okay. And I could track his day and his mood and his energy and his fatigue and his focus. And I thought, I'm pretty certain that the way he starts his day is impacting the rest of his day. And he doesn't realize this, okay? So we did an experiment. I said, okay, you've been starting your days for years with this sugary bowl of cereal. You've read the marketing, you think it's healthy. Would you be interested in doing something that I call eat dinner for breakfast? And he said, what do you mean? I said, what do you have for dinner? He goes, well, I like a good dinner. So he was pescatarian, Mel, and he would eat salmon and roasted vegetables in the evenings. I said, okay, could you make extra in the evening and then have the leftovers for breakfast? He goes, well, yeah, I could do that. I haven't done that before. I said, this is just an experiment. And this is a big principle of my entire approach, Mel. I offer them to my patients as experiments, not as prescriptions. What I want to do is inspire that patient to go, hey, listen, you know what it feels like to start your day like this.
Right.
What does it feel like for you when you start your day with something else? So then for the next week, he literally did this. And, it would be often in the morning, he'd have salmon and roasted vegetables like sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts, whatever.
One ingredient
foods.
Yep.
The salmon protein, which is satiating, can keep you full for longer. And he came in to see me a few weeks later. He goes, Dr. Chelsea, I feel like a completely different person, right? I'm better at work now. I have more concentration, more focus. I'm not actually hungry till 2 p.m., right? And this is the thing people don't realize about hunger. People think they're not eating enough. Sometimes you're eating the wrong thing, which is making you hungry. So literally that one change for him taught him how important it was to start his day with these one ingredient foods. And then what's so important about that, Mel, is that he is paying attention to how he feels. So then what happens later is that he wants to continue doing that, not because I asked him to, no, because something else has happened. He has felt the difference. And that's always been my approach. You can take alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Or caffeine, the sort of things people are always struggling with.
Right.
My job with a patient has never, ever been to tell them you must give up alcohol or you must give up smoking or whatever it might be. My job has always been to show that person what impact it's having. And so I think one of the reasons I've always had really good compliance with my patients is I don't talk down to them. I see them as equal partners and I say, hey, listen, I think this is what's going on. Why don't you experiment this way and see how that feels? Does that all make sense, Mel?
Oh my, not only does it make sense, you've actually handed the power back to us. And you have also activated this internal drive to want to feel better.
These days, people are struggling with fatigue. They don't have energy. They're struggling with motivation.